I've got a major moss problem in my lawn today. I'm going to kill it with liquid iron. So in this video, I'm going to show you the moss that I've got. We'll talk about conditions that are favorable for moss growth. I'm going to mix up a batch of liquid iron and spray the entire lawn. I'm going to go over my big picture plan to keep the moss from coming back, because frankly, killing moss is the easiest part. Okay, the hardest part is keeping it from coming back, because if you don't change something, it's just going to return, and probably in the same season. So at the very end of the video, we'll check the results, see if it was successful. So stick around, got a lot to do. So today is May 10th. It's been about 2 weeks since the snow has melted off the lawn. So it's still greening up, it's still filling in, but it's not going to fill in as much as I want because of the moss. So you'll see that it doesn't look terrible. Still greening, still browning. It doesn't look like maybe that there's a ton of moss out here, but if you look closer, any of these spots, this is pretty much mostly moss. You can see that. The only thing green in here is moss, actually. So any of these locations in this area, there's some green grass coming up, but I mean, look at that. Look how thick that is. So this section is particularly bad. You can see this entire row, pretty much this entire area has really thick moss. If you just look, you can see how close that is, look how tight that is. Welcome back to the Alaskan lawn classroom. I hope you brought your number 2 pencils. Okay, so I want to go over some of the reasons, right, why moss will appear in a lawn such as mine. I've done some research on the topic because it's a year after year problem for me, and I've kind of summarized what I've found here and sort of my interpretation of everything that I've sort of found. So basically, moss is going to grow in a lawn because the grass is weak. That's really the main point of all of this, is where grass doesn't want to grow, it opens up a window for moss to come in if the conditions are right for moss. That's really the biggest point, is if you can keep grass growing, if you can keep your turf strong in all areas, then it should be fine. And that's what I'm going to try to do here once we get rid of it. I try to beef it back up. And first favorable condition that I've got, these aren't in any particular order, but A is shade. Moss likes to grow in shady areas. That's not a surprise to anybody, right? Anytime you go walk in the forest, there's often moss growing on the ground, on tree stumps, on rocks, where there's a canopy up above and no sunlight gets through. It's a shady area. Moss is going to grow. It's the same with your lawn. Grass isn't going to want to grow where it's shady. If you've got, portions of your lawn blocked by your house, neighbor's house, other buildings, trees, that could be an issue. And there's not a whole lot you can do about it unless you want to cut down a bunch of trees, right? Nobody really wants to do that. So you have to find other ways to try to keep grass growing there, keep it nourished, make the conditions favorable for grass to grow as best you can. I've got a couple of small areas in my lawn don't receive a lot of direct sunlight, and those are, some of the mossier areas. Number B, damp, wet, moist. Moss likes to grow where it's damp, wet, moist. If you've got an area of your yard that doesn't drain right, it's always collecting water, it stays moist, it doesn't have a chance to dry out, that is a recipe for moss. Grass doesn't like to be inundated in water, right? You don't want to overwater grass. It's going to make that condition unfavorable for grass, and moss likes that condition, so it's going to grow there. I don't really have that problem here. Soils here drain really well. There's a gentle slope, so I mean, there's no real pooling of water. There's no wet spots out here. So I don't think that's really an issue here, other than the climate that we have, where we get a lot of rain late in the season. So like late August, September, October is our kind of rainy time here. If you grow your turf tall like I usually do, it can stay wet pretty much all the time, and that's probably not good for this problem, especially leading into winter and snow cover. So that could be an issue for me, based pretty much on climate, and maybe cutting the grass too tall so it doesn't have a chance to really dry out. Some compact soils. If you've got clays, clay-rich soil, something that's really hard, an area on your turf that gets a lot of traffic, a lot of walking traffic, or bicycles, or motorcycle, or if you drive a car on your turf, that can cause compacted soil. Grass does not like that. It's hard to grow into that. It's hard to get the right fertilizer and nutrients and water to have water penetrate that. So yeah, compact soil, another reason. Not really a problem here on this lot. So again, we'll move on to number D. Low pH. So the soils in this region are known for having a low pH. They're acidic soils. South Central Alaska has acidic soils. Yeah, so just as a reminder, pH is a scale from 0 to 14, 7 being neutral. Grass, cool season grasses, like we have here, prefer a pH of about 6.5, maybe 6.3 to 6.8 is kind of the average that you'll see in different recommendations. So the only way to really to know what your pH is in your soil is to get a soil test done, submit a soil test to a soils laboratory, which I did actually last year. I submitted 3 soil tests from this lot. It's 18,000 square feet of turf, so it's big, and so I picked out 3 areas that were interesting to me to find out exactly what the pH was and other nutrients. It came back with a 5.5, 5.7, and a 6.1 were the pH results that I got. The 5.5 and the 5.7 are low. Considering grass, these cool season grasses, Kentucky bluegrass and fescues prefer a mid-6 range pH, so there's a lot of room to grow there, and that could be a reason why I've got a moss problem, because the grass doesn't like a low pH, and moss either likes it or doesn't care. So I have started on a fairly aggressive plan to boost up the pH. I've got a bunch of lime amendments to add to the lawn. I've put one down already. And then I'm going to retest the soil next summer, see what the results are, and go from there with further planning for further amendments to bring up the pH. Number D, undernourished soil. So another reason why your grass isn't going to want to grow is it doesn't have the nutrients it needs to stay healthy and robust and fight off, disease and drought and overwatering and any other environmental conditions that it prefers. Fertilizer will help that, certainly. You want to keep fertilizing your lawn on a plan that will keep your soil rich with nutrients that the grass likes. In this case, based on the soil test that I did have done, the nutrients in the soil are below what is recommended for the cool season grasses. I'm low on phosphorus, low on potassium. Both of those are two of the three major macronutrients in fertilizer, right? That's easily fixable just with keeping on a regular fertilizing schedule, which I plan to do. All right, to summarize, for my lawn, of these conditions that are favorable for moss, I'm dealing with basically a low pH and undernourished soil with a little bit of damp, wet, moist based on the climate. So I've put a plan together to try to bring my soil conditions up to where turf grass prefers it. Class is over. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about the product I'm going to put down. So let's get to that. I actually have two different iron products. This one's actually 6% iron, and this one's 5%. And also, interestingly enough, neither of these labels say anything about moss. So they're not marketed as a moss control product. These are marketed to be used as a supplement to your lawn, to help green up your grass, or for iron deficiency in plants and trees. If you were to get a moss killing product, it would be the same thing though. It's iron sulfate. That's exactly what these are. I really wanted to get a liquid product though for better coverage of the lawn and also better penetration into the plant. I'm only trying to cover the foliar parts of moss so that it takes in the iron, and it should kill it pretty quickly. The application rates on both of these products is similar. I think they are 8 to 16 ounces of the concentrated product per 1,000 square feet of turf. And then you're supposed to dilute it with enough water to sufficiently cover what you're spraying, which is pretty vague. I'm going to go with 1 gallon of water per 10 ounces of product. And so 1 gallon will result in 1,000 square feet of turf covered. Which means if I fill this 4-gallon backpack sprayer, I'll be able to get 4,000 square feet of turf. And to get 18,000 square feet of turf, I'll need to fill this 4.5 times and apply it. So I got a lot of walking to do, and a lot of mixing and spraying to do this afternoon. Well, I also forgot to mention that I've got 2 other products I'm going to be putting in the mixture. One is a surfactant, which is just a product that breaks down the surface tension of water so that it gets better application to the foliar parts of it. It doesn't beat up, right? Water won't beat up on the surface. It flattens out. It's basically a soap. And the other one is a pattern indicator, which is basically a dye. I've never tried this before. You put a little bit of dye in your mixture, and then when you're spraying your product down, it paints it blue, in this case blue. We'll see how that works. This is going to be a very dark mixture anyway, so I don't know. We'll see if the blue comes out of it. The idea is that you'll see where you've already sprayed, and then so you won't overspray the same area, and you won't miss spots because you'll be able to see, oh, that's blue, I've already sprayed there, or that's not blue, I need to spray there. Oh, but I know what you're thinking. Why would you want a blue lawn? Who wants to spray blue dye all over their lawn? What's the point of that? Unless you're Boise State football team, which we're not. And the point is that it's supposed to wear off in 24 to 48 hours. And also, this is a good time for me to try it out. The lawn hasn't fully woken up this spring yet, and also planning on doing some dethatching. So there's going to be some tearing up of turf going on. So it's a good time to test out something like this and see exactly how it works. I sprayed the first 4 gallons, got it on the lawn. The marker paint is helpful because I can actually tell the spots that I've sprayed. And now that I see it, I kind of remember someone else had done a video a while back using, I think, the same product. I think it was a blue marker. It might have been Ryan Knoll in one of his earlier videos, because it really looks like green on the lawn. And if you have grass that's really greened up, it might be really hard to see this color in the lawn. It works just fine in this case because a lot of the lawn is still brown, so it's working well for me. So this first tank, I started out too slowly with my pace and put it on a little too thick, which I think will be fine. It's just that I didn't get the full 4,000 feet that I wanted to with 4 gallons. So I've adjusted my pace and we should be good from here on out. But let me show you some of what the paint marker looks like. So you can see the line right here has already been, this side has already been sprayed and this has not, and you can just kind of see a green line as you go through there. It might be harder to see on video than it is in person, but I can definitely tell where I've been and where I haven't been. And right here you can really tell this border strip here, where I was walking much too slowly because it's really thick right there. And yeah, ignore the extensive vole damage. That's a different story for a different time. One other thing that I forgot to mention is that I know that this type of backpack sprayer is not the best tool to use in this job. With a lawn of 18,000 square feet, having a pump sprayer isn't really the most efficient way to do it. If I had one of those battery powered backpack sprayers, that would be better, where you could mix up 4 gallons and it would spray without having to pump it, because the pump not only wears you out a little bit, but it's also uneven pressure at the nozzle, whereas if it was a battery powered sprayer, it would be a constant pressure and a better application. But this is what I got for now, so this is what I'm using and I'm going with it. So I'm going to mix up another batch and hit the next section. Okay, that was a lot of work. But anyway, let's move on. I want to talk about my plan for this lawn this season to make sure that I don't have the same moss issue come up next spring, because that's what's happened every year since we lived here, about 8 years. It's just a moss fest. So here's the plan. Number 1, kill the moss. Hopefully we just did that. I'll check on it in a couple days and see if there's any spots that need to be touched up on. Make sure there was enough coverage. Hopefully got the job done. Because the second step here is to remove it, and that's by dethatching the lawn. Dethatching is pretty commonly done, not to necessarily remove dead moss, but just to remove thatch from your lawn, which is the thin or thick layer of organic material at the base of the turf right above the soil. There's a ton of thatch built up. I know already over the last few years. I have dethatched the lawn before, It's been about 3 years, and every year when I kill the moss and don't remove it, it probably just stacks up. So if you're going to kill it, you probably should remove it, so it doesn't sit there clogging up the lawn as dead organic material. So dethatch. So that'll be coming up in a week or two. Overseed and feed, number 3. After I dethatch, I'll overseed the lawn with a specific Alaska blend of seed that they sell. It's mostly blue, Kentucky bluegrass and different fescues. And I think a ryegrass, but it might just be an annual ryegrass. I'll overseed. I don't want to do a core aeration just because I've done that in the past and the soil's not compacted. And I feel like sometimes when you pull all those cores out, you're just gonna contribute to the thatch. Once you've dethatched it and now you're just adding more thatch to the surface, is it really gonna break down? I don't know. I'm gonna try out a liquid aeration product that could help the soil, loosen up, let air and nutrients move around within the soil layers a little bit easier. So I'm going to try that instead of doing a core aeration, which a lot of people would probably recommend if you're going to overseed to do a core aeration, but not going to do that. Just going to overseed it and put a starter fertilizer down. Starter fertilizer will be good not only for the new seed but also to feed nutrients into the soil, because it'll have a lot of the phosphorus and potassium that some of the other fertilizers, they don't have them at those levels. So that'll be good. And also in feeding, to go on a regular fertilization schedule. So every month or so to refeed the lawn, and especially in the fall, which is one that I usually miss because by the fall I'm usually over it. I'm usually done with the yard. It's too big to keep a hold of, and plus it's raining a lot, so it doesn't look bad because it's been rained on and it's greened up. So it's easy for me by August, end of August, to just kind of be whatever. But this year I'm going to stick with it, especially with a fall feed. Get a fall fertilizer in, because hopefully that'll help it green up earlier in the spring. And hopefully that'll keep it healthier to keep the moss out in the springtime once the snow melts. Number 4, adjust the pH. Like I mentioned before, I need to raise the pH level to the mid-6 range, and I've started with that. I put down an application of lime already, granular, and also a liquid lime application already this season, and I'll do a couple more of those. And number 5 is stick with it. Like I said, I have a tendency by the end of the season to be done with it and not follow through and keep the lawn fed and keep it trimmed right. I think another thing I need to do is keep it trimmed lower, cut the grass at a lower level in the fall when it's wetter. That way maybe it can dry out a little bit better and keep that moss from coming in over the winter and hammering me in the spring. So that's the plan going forward. Okay, so it's been a couple of days since I sprayed the liquid iron on the lawn, and I've got some sort of mixed results. I'm not entirely stoked about the condition of the moss. It's not all just black dead like I was kind of hoping. Most of it's kind of browning and still a little bit green, but I think on the right track. Let me show you what I'm talking about. Okay, so let me find a couple of spots like right here. This looks pretty good, actually. It's still a little bit green in there, but I think that it's well on its way to dying. That looks pretty good, and I can see in here the darkness kind of coming out. This looks like it's just kind of a little browning kind of, the moss that's in that pack. Okay, so this spot is still, like I said, kind of brown. looks like it's pretty dead. The moss in there is pretty dead, so that's good. This is all dead. At least mostly dead. Mostly dead. Mostly dead. So that's pretty good. That section is pretty good. I can see in here some darkness. That's good. Let's check this area. Okay. This is a little bit mixed. Starting to, that's kind of brown. Not black though, like this is. And all of this is still pretty green. I'm not seeing as much darkness in here as I would like to see. Okay, so just to summarize a couple of things as I wrap this up. I did, when I was spraying with the 4-gallon sprayer, I did not really walk at the pace I wanted to. I was much slower because I found that I wasn't getting the coverage that I wanted as I was spraying at a faster speed. So I went slower. So I ended up using 6.5 backpack sprayer loads of product instead of 4.5. I think the lawn survived okay. If I had gone at the pace that I had intended, I think the results would have been worse probably. I think the grass did okay with it. I think the grass is absorbing the iron and looking pretty good, which was the actual intended marketed purpose of the product. Also, the blue dye seems to mostly have gone away magically somehow. Part of that reason might be because the lawn is still greening up for the spring. But I can't really tell in most cases, in most parts of the lawn, that there was any dye sprayed there, other than the parts that are still brown or dead from the winter that still has a little bit of tint to it. And the last thing I wanted to mention is that there is another way to spray a moss killing product onto your lawn if you're wanting to do so. There are lawn liquid products that come in the smaller jugs that have a hose-in sprayer on it that you connect your garden hose to and run water through it, and it applies the appropriate amount of product to whatever volume of water you're pushing through it. The caveat with that is that that's typically a much smaller area. Those cover a smaller area. And it's more expensive. If I had a smaller lawn or a small area that I needed moss control on, that would probably be the best option. I feel like liquid is definitely better than granular in this case, just because it's going to react more quickly. It's going to be more instant. It's going to be a much quicker result than a granular product would be. So I think that wraps everything up here. Thanks again for watching the video.